Hello, and welcome back to Let's Write an Adventure, our ongoing live stream where we are creating a complete campaign from scratch. I'm your host, RJ Kerr, and today we are going to be wrapping up some of the final details of the Ghost Ship Castle Caper. But first, if this is your first time watching us or joining this channel, let me give you a quick rundown of what we've done and what we're doing so that you kind of know where you're jumping into. So we are building out a completely custom campaign, including a completely original domain of Dread from scratch, showing you all the steps, all the pieces. None of the work is done off screen. It's all done here in front of you so that you can see all the pieces and parts that go into it, every thought, every stumble, every edit, all that kind of stuff, warts and all, as they say. So we have already done a lot of work on this. We have figured out how our characters enter into this domain of dread that we've created through a portal that opens up on the Blood Moon, and we've talked about various motivations for what might draw our characters through that of their own free will. We have created the shantytown where the characters first land within this domain of dread, a place we're calling Darkport, which exists on the edge of an inland sea. In fact, we've decided that much of this domain of dread takes place in and around this inland sea that used to once be the basin of a thriving civilization, or a basin that held a thriving civilization, has now become flooded, and that civilization in ruins. We've also figured out the elemental evil that is controlled or contained by this domain of dread, an entity we're calling Ovander. We still have lots of details to figure out about him. We have figured out our very first, or written our very first adventure for this, where the first level characters are kidnapped and briefly enslaved and have to escape their captors, and in doing so discover the existence of an artifact that gives the wielder some power over this domain of dread, and becomes obvious to the characters that this is their best lead for getting out of the domain of dread with their lives. And so now we're working on a part of the adventure that I like to call a proactive segment, where the characters are armed with some information. They're out of captivity now. They can start making their own moves and their own plans and investigating throughout this wide world in order to find this artifact. And to do that, we're using what we'll call a node structure, where we're creating these investigative scenes or investigative nodes that are rife with clues, and allows our characters to investigate or search these different areas, interacting with them with whatever bit of adventure we have there, find the clues or not find the clues that are there, and then follow them to a different node, a different investigative scene. This gives our players a lot of agency, and still gives us some structure with which to write, so that when we're coming to the table, we're not having to invent this entirely from scratch. We have something already put together to roll with to make our jobs as DMs a little bit easier. So we've been building out various parts of these different investigative scenes, these different nodes, and we are kind of using the term node and investigative scene interchangeably here. Um, but we have built out one first adventure that was a pretty standard five room dungeon kind of design. But it's a little mini adventure in there for the characters to engage with and search. And now we're building out a high style adventure. So let me go ahead and share my screen for that. And this is one that are calling, for the time being, our Ghost Ship Castle Caper. And the idea is that there's a stronghold that's built from the remnants of dozens or more shipwrecks, and that these ships have been salvaged and deconstructed and reconstructed and repurposed into a stronghold for Sahuagin. Um, the uh, this stronghold has within it a ship's logbook that has a clue where this location, the final resting location of this artifact is, and the characters have to go in and acquire this logbook to get that clue, and to be able to follow it up and find this artifact. So we've done a couple things here. We've created a bank of potential creatures that we might use. We've given ourselves an allotment of for the difficulty for the XP or an XP bank for the difficulty of the encounters. We have created a number of encounters that we have put into a table called action groups. And this is so that this can be more dynamic because in your sort of typical dungeon, you have, you have sort of fixed encounters that are tied to specific areas. Whereas in a heist style adventure or a raid style adventure, you want some of those encounters to move about the facility to make it feel more alive and a little more organic. And so we've created a table to make that easy for ourselves. And then we've started building out using a modification of this 5 room dungeon. We're using something that I call the 5 scene dungeon, where effectively it's the same sort of structure, but we have a broader interpretation. And this makes it really useful for things like heist planning, for writing heists, um, because we can follow those same sort of steps. We have one is our entry, and this is where our characters get involved in the heist planning. They know what they want, they know where it is. Now they got to figure out how to get it, and they are rewarded for doing preliminary research and scouting out the location and learning things like guard patrols and what have you. And so we've held some space for that. Uh, then we have worked on what would be our setback in a 5 room dungeon or a 5 scene dungeon. And this is really kind of what happens when things go awry, because they're going to go awry. We pretty much know that. And so in this case, it's pretty simple. What happens when how do action groups get alerted? What happens when they're alerted? How do they raise the alarm? What happens if the characters get captured? That kind of stuff, all outlined as part of our setback. Then we were working on what in a 5 room dungeon we would call the puzzle, but I'll call a challenge in our 5 scene dungeon. And this is pretty straightforward. It's find the object, the thing, the MacGuffin that they're looking for. It's get the thing. Or alternatively, in a reverse heist, it is put the thing back. But in this case, it is get the thing, it's get the logbook. And so we've built out a number of keyed locations to give ourselves some tools and toys to play around with while our characters go about exploring this facility. And it'll be really helpful. And we'll probably add some more to this too when we start working on a map, which will be really helpful in heist planning and running a sort of heist. Um, but we're not quite there just yet. We also still need to fill out some hazards and some treasure in this place here, and really kind of polish off these rooms because we've done pretty much their descriptions, but not a whole lot else with them. And then in a 5 room dungeon setup, you have your big bad evil guy, your BBEG. But in a 5 scene dungeon, you think of this more in terms of the climax, some sort of high stakes, tension increasing situation that makes getting out in a heist harder than it was getting in. This is where things go, the unexpected happens and things go awry. And so last time, we're working on this climax by building out uh, this idea of a group of dignitaries arriving specifically from one of the other factions that we've been working on. A Slod-led faction is the idea we settled on, um, where they are admitted to the stronghold, and this sort of shifts around the day-to-day activities, moving the rank and file about, and adding some more baddies that weren't there previously, which are again more eyes to potentially detect our characters, or more encounters for our characters to have to slog their way through if they're running this as more of a raid. Um, and so we built out the action groups for that, and we added them to our action group table in the form of some climax area 3, climax area 15 kind of stuff here. And then last but not least, we still need to build out our reward. The 5th room in a 5 room dungeon is a reward, and it's the same sort of thing in a 5 scene dungeon. But in this case, that reward is information. It's the clue that they're there to get, or the big clue that they're there to get in the form of the ship's log. So that sort of brings me into the mind of today. Let's work on some of the clues that the characters can find here, because we want there to be more than one. There's one big clue, it's the ship's log, and it should be a hefty clue because they've gone through this whole adventure to get it. And so to me, that's a good solid lead on the location of this artifact. This is a pretty meaty sort of clue. uh, and it should lead us somewhere pretty significant because they've had to succeed this whole heist to get this done. Um, but we should also put some other clues in here throughout, some clues that aren't as valuable because they don't move the adventure as sharply forward. Um, but perhaps lead to other investigative nodes. And we want to put extra clues in here like that because there's always the possibility that our characters are going to miss something, or they're going to fail the heist, or they're going to get caught and have to escape as opposed to getting the thing that they came to get. And so we don't want them to leave completely empty-handed. We don't want the adventure to come to a screeching halt because they failed. We want them to have to adjust course and go do other things. Um, so before we jump into this, one quick reminder to everybody who's here: this is an interactive channel. So as you're watching, as you have thoughts and ideas and opinions of your own and that kind of deal, jump into the chat. I would love to hear from you. Some of the coolest, most creative stuff that comes out of this channel really comes from you guys. And you guys come up with some amazing ideas all the time. So I really love to get your thoughts and opinions as we work through this. So don't be shy. Jump in and let's chat it out. In fact, we already have our very first comment here. So we've got Fantasy Animal Vegan. Ooh, very exciting to check this out. I'm starting a homebrew campaign this weekend and excited to get some additional inspiration. Absolutely. Homebrew campaigns are so much fun to run. One thing that I will tell you, if you are starting this, and I don't know how much experience you have, so I might be preaching to the choir here, Fantasy Animal Vegan, and probably I am. Um, One part of the artifice of what we do on this channel is that there's no timeline on us getting this done, right? We don't have a game next weekend or this weekend, and we don't have a party that's waiting for the action, right? So we'll go into a lot of detail and put down a lot of extra content in here that you might not necessarily need, and you might be able to kind of make up on the fly as you go when you run these sorts of things and you're creating these things for your own tables. But it's here so you can see the whole thought process and how that works. So just bear that in mind, that we could absolutely run an adventure with what we have here right now, for example. We could run it with less than what we have here for right now, for example. But since we have all the time in the world on this channel, we will get into the details and the nitty gritty that you may or may not want to take the time to do when you're running your own homebrew. Cool. All right. With that in mind, I have babbled on enough in advance to us actually getting in here and doing some of the work. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. Well, the ship's log reward is pretty straightforward from my point of view here. It's a big, meaty, uh, it's sort of a big meaty piece of information that we're giving to the characters from it, and so I think it really should give us the clue that leads to the artifact itself. This is one of those points that connects directly to where the artifact is located, and that should be what's in the ship's log. And so I think we're going to go ahead and put that down here. Though we have another comment. Fantasy Animal Vegan, so good. Love not having a timeline. I've been spending about 3 hours a night for the past 6 weeks, lol. But I've gone crazy detailed, like considering NPC's birth order. Yeah, I am very much with you. I get in the weeds too when I write my homebrew stuff, which is why I try to warn people that you don't have to do that. If it's part of your process and it works for you, by all means, go for it if you enjoy it. But it's not part of everybody's methodology for this sort of thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so let's see here. Reward the ship's log. Let's see here. Among the various other reports and entries, the ship's log, and we probably need a ship name for this. We're just calling it the ship's log, but it's the log of what? What ship? We'll have to think of that. We'll have to come up with a name. The Petulant Pegasi or something along those lines. We'll have to think about it. It should probably be one of the ships that has been repurposed into the stronghold. So might be, as long as we're getting into the weeds on things, might be something worth considering. So the ship Uh, the ship's log contains a reference to the artifact having been once part of a manifest delivered to a cloistered community of scholars and wizards now lost deep beneath the waves. And I can put that down because we've already kind of brainstormed out that that's where the artifact is. One of the things I recommend when you're working on any kind of mystery, anything that involves clues and clue giving, that you figure out what the answer is first and then work your way backwards. It just makes it a lot easier, in my opinion. And so we have our big clue. We know that this is leading them to or leading the characters to the artifact that they're searching for. And now we want to add some other clues in here as well. So real quick, let's go ahead and copy that. We're going to go back to our Go here. We're using a story circle format to kind of organize the arcs that we take throughout this campaign. And story circle is not my invention. It's check it out. It's used by novelists and screenwriters and that kind of deal. It's very much worth taking a look at some point. But it makes a cool campaign kind of structure for us to use and then deviate from as necessary. But let's see here. We've got our Ghost Ship Castle, and we've got our working document here for the Castle Caper. And so here we're documenting the clues that can be found there. And so let's go ahead and put that down here, and we're going to say that this is going to lead to D. Now, the organization here that we're doing is pretty simple. We've broken, let me scroll to the top and I'll kind of go through this here. We've broken out this structure into, like I said, a node structure where we have these nodes or investigative scenes, which I'm kind of using interchangeably here. And each one has at least 3 clues to it. And those clues include one clue that leads to sort of the next layer of the mystery. And then 2 clues that lead to other scenes within the same layer of the mystery. And so we've come up with a few. We have our primary scene, which is just one scene that we can, or one set of clues that we can kind of drop on the characters no matter where they are to kind of get them going and give them some of their first leads and that kind of deal. And this is our primary scene. And then we have secondary scenes, so our second layer to the mystery. And this is these are places that the characters can go to investigate from the clues they've learned about in the primary scene. So we've just given them numbers, so B1, B2, B3. And we've outlined what kind of clues those are and where they might go. We've given ourselves just a little bit of information. And then we've started building out some of those secondary scenes, and we've got some work to do with some of them, but we have started building out what clues might exist there. And as we said, one clue leads to the next layer of the mystery, so our tertiary scenes. And then the other clues lead to the other investigative scenes within this level of the mystery. So that, again, if they don't find the big clue, they find something else that leads them to another investigative scene. And they may find it all, and they may choose to investigate all of it. Or, they might get lucky and go straight to the end, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But lots of clues here because they're likely going to miss something as they go through, because they're not going to think the same way that you thought when you were building this out. And so we've done some of that with our 3 secondary scenes here, which still need some more building out. We've done one adventure in there, and we've done one kind of basic social encounter, but we have some more complicated ones that we're going to want to build out, and we'll get to those later. And then we have our tertiary scenes, so this is our third layer of the mystery here. And this is what we're working on with our Ghost Ship Castle Caper. And so we know that we need clues that lead one to the other parts of this other parts of this layer. So we've got a C3, the moving aisle. We need a C2, And then we have a D, which is our solution scene. And so we know that takes us to the end. Now we've added a Storm Giant's tomb to this, which I'm not sure which layer we're going to put that in, but that was an idea from one of you guys. Uh, and so that's another investigative node we'll build out, and we'll put that in the layer where it's appropriate, and build some extra clues in to help find that and lead to that area there. So with that in mind, we know that we need a C2, and C2 is a wizard's tower. We have this idea for the wizard's tower being an enormous pillar of salt growing out of the shallow lagoon. The wizard has a hidden link to the Aboleth-led faction. And then when the PCs arrive, the wizard seems helpful enough, though distracted, and they come up with myriad reasons to stall. They, being the wizard, come up with myriad reasons to stall and resist giving the characters the information that they're seeking, while ensuring the characters stick around. Unknown to the PCs, the wizard has contacted the Aboleth-led faction and is stalling until they arrive to attempt a rescue of the PCs. And so we'll build out something for that later, but we know that we need something that leads us to this wizarding tower in here, in our Ghost Ship Castle Caper, something that connects. So let's figure out where we want to put that. In the meantime, though, we got a couple more comments. Fantasy Animal Vegan says, Story Circle, I'll check it out. Yeah, highly recommend it. It's absolutely worth checking out. It's a great sort of framework to really tell a comprehensive story that follows that hero's journey without getting too into the weeds on it. And then they say, so good. Oh, well, I appreciate it. I'm glad you're enjoying this. All right. I enjoy doing this with you all. So, what sort of clue can we put in here that would lead to the wizard's tower? And then also, where can we put the ship's log in the actual, various places within this within the stronghold? Um, there's two sort of schools of thought we can go with on this, and I would love to have what your opinion is, what you think we should do. The first school of thought is we can put the ship's log in a physical place, and it's in the library, or it's in the treasure room, or something along those lines. That's one thing that we can do. The other thing we can do is we can attach it to a person as part of an action group. Knowing, though, then that is going to force our characters to interact with that action group and likely force a combat, which could lead to other ramifications, unless you've got a group that's especially good at kind of devising cons on the fly, which maybe they are, maybe they can. It can turn into an Ocean's 11 sort of thing. But I think, personally, it's easier for the players, more manageable for them, I should say. Not necessarily easier, but more manageable for them. And rewards sort of the idea of a heist here a little bit more if we put it in a physical location as opposed to on a person. But I would love to have your thoughts. This is your channel too, so depending on what you think we should do, let me know. In the meantime, possible places that we could be putting this are the gatehouse, guard post, throne room, barracks room, kitchen, great hall, storage hall, crow's nest, the stone arch that this is all sort of jammed around, windmill, treasure room, temple, shark pens, prison cells, and the library. Let's see here. Fantasy Animal Vegan says, in someone's bedside table, sticking out from under a piece of furniture. Yeah, we can put it in whatever kind of place we want to put it in here. We can, absolutely, it could be in somebody's bedside table if it's in one of the rooms, if it could be under furniture, if it's in an unusual sort of place, maybe somebody's been reading it, it could be jammed in a library. The only thing that I would say that we should think about if we're going to put it into a physical place in here as opposed to on a person is there should be some logic to it. Because in a heist, the characters are not rewarded for exploring every room, right? They're rewarded for being as strategic and as surgical as possible. And so we want there to be some, in general, we want there to be some kind of of logic as to where it's found, so that when they're planning this heist out, they have the idea of like, oh well, let's search the library, let's search the treasure vault, let's search some other similar place that makes some sense. Let's see here. We've got a couple more comments. You find the book floating in the shark pen with a bite taken out of it. With a bite taken out of the shark. LOL. I like that. That's or a bite taken out of the book, and the rest of the book inside the shark. Yeah, we could do that. We could do that. I think the only, huh? I was gonna say my only immediate sort of like, I don't know about that, is that I think perhaps as a player, I would think that the book is there just therefore destroyed and go, oh, it's ruined, we can't get what we need, and not think like, let's gut the shark. Um, but that's just me as a player. That's not all the other players. People find all kinds of weird stuff inside sharks. So something to think about. Jonathan Frost says if the slot envoy is coming to view the log, it needs to be in a place that makes sense. The Sugan should be able to locate it. Yeah. Um, I agree. I agree. It needs to be in a place that has some logic to it. Um, I'm leaning towards the library on that. It's a place where they keep books. It makes sense. It's also flooded, and so it adds an extra layer of challenge. If I'm remembering correctly, yeah, 15 flooded. So it forces our players to kind of get underwater at a certain point here, um, and we also have built out an action group from the slot that are going to the library, and so we add a layer of tension and something dynamic. It's kind of pushing the timeline there and could perhaps interrupt the characters as they spend a fair amount of time in there searching for the book, searching for the ship's log. So I'm kind of leaning towards putting in the library, unless I hear any objections from the audience or from the chat. All right. Hearing none, I will go ahead and put it in here, and we can always change it later. Let's see. Treasure. Among the various other, I should just say among various other tomes and monographs. One of my favorite words to work into a library, monographs. Among various other tomes and monographs, the library contains the ship's log. Cool. Easy breezy. Okay. So we know that that's going to be there. That's one of the clues that's available. And that's easy enough to drop in there. It makes sense. It works well with our story. It's the sort of place that the characters would think to look and think to get to, and meaning that we don't want to confound them too much. We might give them some difficulty in finding it. So we might say something along the lines of any character who searches the shelves can find the log. Any character who searches the shelves can find the log on a successful DC 15 intelligence investigation check. Which begs the question, well, what if they fail that check? Well, in this case, in one of these cases, and in this sort of rare case, I would say they can redo the check, but that there's a time component there because they are kind of under the clock, right? As creatures move throughout, as action groups move throughout the stronghold, something taking longer than expected um, is uh, can become a hazard in and of its own. So, for example, we have any character who searches the shelves to find the log. Any character who searches the shelves, comma, not can find, does find, finds the log on a successful DC 15 intelligence check. Um, each, we should say, this, the search takes 10 minutes, and after which the check can be repeated. My general rule on this, on repeating checks, is that if there's some sort of reason why, if there's some sort of time crunch involved, then yeah, checks should be allowed. You should be able to repeat checks. If if they have all day to do something, then, well, I don't usually allow repeating checks. But in this case, because the action groups are moving and we've got dignitaries arriving and things that are happening as the time kind of continues on, um, I would. I would allow a repeat in the check, just saying that the search is taking longer and longer and longer. We got a couple other comments here. Let's hear. Fantasy Animal Vegan says, let's say the players search the library and roll a 17. Do you give them a list of multiple books, or would you just focus on this log that seems to most attract their attention? Or that's a really good question. If they succeed the check, I give them the information. I would say that, hey, out of all the books they find here, they find one that fits the you let's get in the headspace of a DM here instead of just kind of paraphrasing. Let's do this. Let's say, okay, so you roll a 17. All right, you're searching the shelves, looking among the various tomes, all waterlogged, some warped with age and submersion. And you come across a leather-bound tome that is about the size and shape that you would expect of a ship's log. You pull that off the shelf and open it up, and success. It's the one that you're looking for. It has the information inside. Now you just need to escape with it. I would do something along those lines where they know they've had that moment where they're kind of where they've obtained the treasure. They have the yes, we've got it, and now they've got this new objective: get out with the ship's log and your life. Jonathan Frost says, should there be penalties to subsequent rolls mitigated by the help action? You could, if you want to have a penalty for that. I think the penalty is just the time in this case, but the premise that you're sort of purporting there is sound, right? If you're going to allow multiple rolls for something, there should be some penalty for failure, right? You shouldn't just be, well, you didn't find it, try again. Well, you didn't find it, try again. In this case, the fact that time moves on is our penalty. Because, for example, when I'm running this, I'm probably going to move action groups around every 10 minutes or so. And so if the search takes 10 minutes, well, then somebody might come into the library. And so that might put us in a situation where now they've got to not just search the library, but now they got to hide and search the library. And so it just, so I would view that as the penalty in this particular case. But if we were doing something like, you are, you've got to pick a lock or something along those lines, and there isn't as much of a time component to it, or that's less likely that you're going to be uncovered, then yeah, some penalties as they fumble around in the lock and they damage things, or they get themselves turned around, or they get tumblers out of order and that kind of thing. Absolutely, you could do that. Fantasy Animal Vegan says, you're such a good DM. Oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I hope that you'll come play a game with me. In fact, we're about halfway through, so this is a good opportunity for a shameless self-plug. If you'll bear with me here a second, because I am not just a guy who writes adventures on the internet. I am also a professional dungeon master. And I would love to have each and every one of you in one of my games. I run campaigns and one shots all the time, mostly through startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr. Um, you can find the current campaigns I have up there running. I'll be adding a few more one shots here in the near future. Additionally, if you are in the Huntsville, Alabama area on the 25th, 26th, and 27th of April, you can come check out one of my one shots at the Huntsville Comic and Pop Culture Expo that's going on. I'll be DMing there as well. But if you want to see my games that run all the time, check me out on startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr. It's a great opportunity if you're a DM, a forever DM, to hop in and get to play a little bit. It's also just a good opportunity to jump in and make sure I actually know what I'm talking about as a GM, right? Proof's in the pudding. And so, yeah, I give you all this advice online about how to write adventures and run adventures, but there's only one way to know that I really know what I'm talking about, and that is to jump into one of my games. Um, and let's see here. So with that, that's the end of my shameless self plug. Again, that is startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr. And now we can get back to the action. All right. So we got a couple other comments while I was shooting my mouth off there. We've got one from Jonathan Frost says, given that there's a time component, is this castle scenario a good candidate for wandering monster mechanics? Um, it could be if we didn't have, if we weren't using the action group methodology here. Because we've outlined this so that our action groups, our encounters, pretty much act as the wandering monsters in this instance. So they kind of move about the area, and we've given them a little bit of this, right? Like, we have talked about the Sahuagin warriors and the reef sharks that patrol the Great Hall and the surrounding rooms. We've talked about the work details from the kitchen that serves the kitchen and the mess halls, and maybe they're delivering food elsewhere. So these become kind of our wandering monsters. But if we wanted to take a different tact and pin these to specific locations and make them a little more static, then yes, wandering monster 100% I would put into this because of the time component. Absolutely. Adam Clark says, been binging these episodes for weeks, finally caught up and caught one live. Excited to be here. Fantastic. I'm excited to have you here, Adam. Thanks for joining us today. And Fantasy Animal Vegan says, oh, sweet, I'll definitely join you sometime. Terrific. I would love to meet you at a table. I'd love to meet everybody here at a gaming table. It'd be so much fun to get to play with all of you. All right. So let's see here. What other clue can we drop in here that would lead to this Wizard's Tower location that we have as one of our other investigative scenes? Where could we put something in here? We know that that Wizarding Tower has, or that wizard has ties to the Aboleth-led faction, which we haven't linked to this one because it seemed a little on the nose. We went the Slod-led faction because it was a little more counterintuitive and it added a little bit of diversity in this. So we want to put something in here that links it. We probably don't want to put it in the library because we have we already have a clue there. We definitely don't want it in the prison cell because we already have an encounter, and that's where we have our other clue there. So what could lead to the Wizarding Tower? We could maybe have something in the treasure room that does. What kind of clue? What would lead there, potentially? What would lead to a wizard and link them with the artifact? Fantasy Animal Vegan says, are there animal heads in the Great Room? Might there be a clue hidden in a mounted animal head? There could be. The Great Room, since it is, or the Great Hall, since it is mostly flooded, is more adorned with like captured flags and pennants, and with tables grown from coral and living rock, and the water covers this room up to waist height, making a comfortable dining space for both marine and terrestrial creatures. And there's a large coral head that forms a dais and a table at the far end where the Baron and his advisors dine. Um, and uh, yeah, but we could stick some clues in maybe some of the things that have been captured. Because we do have some trophies all around this place of for example, the figurehead for various ships. We've got in the throne room. We've talked about having other flags and other sort of like brass implements that have been pulled off other ships and what have you. So we might be able to to put something in one of those. The question is what? What would the clue be? Baker's Dozen says, what could aid is the ship's logbook probably shelved in a section with other ships' logs. So if they come across one ship's log, they might figure out that that's the area to really look with great scrutiny. Yeah. And that's something that that's the kind of thing that I would narrate when they find it, is that you come to a section of other ship logs, like that kind of thing is a useful detail. But let's put it in here to give ourselves a little reminder of it. So let's see here. Um, Among various other tomes and monographs, the ship's log, situated, let's see here, situated with, situated alongside several other, situated within a section devoted to ship's logs. And again, this is probably why we need to name this ship. We really need to name to give it a little more, a little more of a, to make it a little more real. I think to make it a little more tangible to our players and our players' mind, it needs to be tied to a certain ship. We need to come up with that name for that ship. Let's see here. Fantasy Animal Vegan says an arcane giant, Billy the Bass, mounted on the wall, and the wizard uses the fish eye for scrying, and it stands out with an investigation check. Is that it is a finely crafted and reflective gem? Yeah, I I know that the Billy the Bass bit is kind of a gag, but effectively, yeah, maybe. Um, that could be a nice subtle clue. It's something that perhaps the wizard is spying with, is scrying with. Um, and that would sort of reward uh, the it would reward the use of some spells like detect magic and thinking along those lines, because we could simply look up what the school of magic that scrying is, and talk about the aura that they gather if they do detect magic or that kind of thing. Or maybe they come into contact with um, uh, one of these you know prizes or what have you, and one of them has just got the faintest crackle of magical energy to it, or something along those lines. It gives us a little bit of a clue. I like that idea of the scrying. Fantasy Animal Vegan then says, "I'm a super campy TM." Yeah, nothing wrong with that at all. It's just it depends on your table and your players, and if you have fun with it, then that's fantastic. Um, and so Adam Clark says, so the eye would have been stolen from the wizard, and the idea is the characters return it. Um, Perhaps it could be that's one way that they could do it. It could also be that the wizard planted it here, and the subtle bit of the clue could be that, well, if that they're not the only ones who have been poking around the Sahuagin stronghold, that maybe the wizard knows something. Um, you know, there might be we might want to come up with some other way to kind of link it to this artifact. Um, but uh, but I think that there's something along those lines where we have a very where we've got a cool point A to point B. I kind of envision it is that, like, if you were running this as, like, a murder investigation, and You came and you're, the police, and you're looking around this room where the victim's been killed, and you're looking for clues, and you find that somebody's left a camera in there, and you can follow where that camera's been transmitting to. Then uh, it's not an illogical sort of leap to go, well, maybe we should look into that, right? It's the same sort of thing with this. If you can come up with this sort of odd, somebody's been spying on the Sahuagin. We're interested in the Sahuagin and what they have here. If somebody else is interested, maybe they know something. It's not a huge leap in logic, but it is a more subtle clue, and it might be one that you might have to kind of feed your party, depending on how quick on the uptake they are on that. And there's no good way to tell whether your group is going to like really seize on that or not ahead of time. You'll have some groups that will find the most tenuous threads that you have in there and will then miss the most obvious clues that connect things, at least as far as you're concerned, and vice versa. Ones that will find obvious clues and not find the more subtle ones. And that's part of the reason why we put so many different clues in here, so that things can be missed. So it's okay to have some subtle clues periodically. So let's put a subtle one in here. We've got two bangers in here. Let's put a little more slender one in here. And so in that case, I would think, what sorts of rooms would this wizard want to spy on? Treasure room comes to mind. The Great Hall comes to mind. The throne room comes to mind. The throne room could be interesting. It would make sense to have a scrying eye in there or something like that. And it would be real dangerous to find it, since that is where we have some of our big baddies and a lot of activity. But we also have that plesiosaur skeleton that we've talked about in there in previous episodes, where there's a plesiosaur skeleton that decorates the rafters, while figureheads of ships jut from the submerged walls. Maybe there is a gemstone in the eye of that plesiosaur skeleton that kind of looks down on the whole throne room, and that is the scrying eye, and that it's noticed with a good perception check of the space. You can see the glint of it up in there. And then there's plenty of things on the walls here to climb up to maybe get up there, that kind of deal. So we could do something along those lines. Yeah, Adam Clark says, I would almost be tempted to put it in the throne room. Yeah, thinking along the same lines there, Adam, for sure. And then Fantasy Anal, ooh, that's cool. Thank you. I am glad that you enjoy it. I'm kind of have sold myself on this. Some of this is just me talking myself into doing things. And so I think I've talked myself into that. So let's say, we'll just mark this as a clue. A scrying eye has been installed in the plesiosaur skull without the knowledge of the Sahuagin. The shine of its gem can be spotted with a successful DC. We can go probably 15 again on this. Maybe lower, because we've got one that requires a 15. One that doesn't require much of a check. So let's. It's pretty well hidden. It's got to be pretty well hidden, or somebody would have spotted. So let's say 15 again. We could say 20 or 18, but let's say 15 on this. Maybe we might tweak it as we play it if we need to. The shine of its gem can be spotted with successful DC 15 wisdom perception check. a DC, we'll make it a lower DC, a DC 12 strength, athletics check is required to climb up to the skeleton. And it occurs to me that having in the throne room could be kind of a cool Hail Mary if the characters get captured and they're dragged in front of the Baron or something along those lines. A smart character kind of scanning around might spot it and be able to use it as kind of a we're here because we heard you were being spied on or something along those lines. And so it creates putting it there creates the opportunity for some other sort of creative play with it. Because who knows what your players are going to come up with. Let's see. Adam Clark says, I'd say a black or dark blue gemstone hidden in the shadows of the animal's prominent brow and deep set eye sockets so as not to draw attention. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's good. So the shine of its, let's see here. We'll say midnight blue gemstone. Skulls eye socket. I'm misspelling socket. There we go. Let's see here. Baker's Dozen says, what if the scrying is coming from an actual living creature, like perhaps an anglerfish with a huge eye instead of a bait at the end of its antenna? It would obviously have been created by a wizard as an abomination. It would be a mobile living scrying device. Yeah, that. Baker's Dozen. I like that idea. But I fear that if we make it too active of a thing, that the characters are going to assume that if it's too active of a thing and it's on the nose, something like an anglerfish, then I think the characters are going to assume that it's Sahuagin attack, like it's one of the Sahuagin sort of devices and not necessarily a wizard's. Now we could feed them that information with an Arcana check. There's nothing wrong with that. Let me chew on that one for a little while because there is something in there that I really like about that, but I'm not sure it's perfect for this, but it's definitely something that I think could be useful at some point, even if it's not in this adventure, in one of the other ones' adventures. It's creepy, it's cool. I like it. Let's figure out where we're gonna put something like that, or how we're gonna work something like that in. Adam Clark says, call the stone a storm quartz. I know it's a little unknown. Sure, storm quartz. Let's do that. Midnight blue of the shine of the storm quartz. Let's see here. Of the storm quartz is midnight blue crystal. We'll say instead of gemstone. Okay. Baker's Dozen, the eye can be removed from the anglerfish as a physical object. Yeah. Jonathan says, oh, wow, an anglerfish scrying the entire castle. Baker's Dozen says you don't have to worry about the placement now because it's mobile. And Jennifer Ross says it's creepy. That's true. If we do that, it needs to become another action group then, which is not a problem because there's one more thing to move around, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Well, you know what? Let's take a vote. We've got plenty of active folks in the channel. What do we think? We think we want to go with the anglerfish version, or that's mobile, or do we want to go with the plesiosaur skeleton, which is static? Um, Place your votes in the chat, please. Let me know what you think. And we will go with whatever the group decides. That's what we'll do. Because that anglerfish is a cool idea. I really like that. All right. So we got one vote for anglerfish. Feel free to vote on your own items. Fantasy Animal Vegan says the anglerfish is too good of an idea for this use. I think save it for something new. Adam Clark really dig the anglerfish. Okay, really digs the anglerfish. All right, so that's 2 for the anglerfish, 1 opposed. All right. I'm assuming Baker's dozen that you're voting for the anglerfish. It was your idea, and you are allowed to vote on your own ideas. There's nothing wrong with that. All right, so I guess we'll use the anglerfish. It is a cool idea. So I guess we'll make that an action group. And let's see here. Fantasy Animal Vegan logs in with 4 other accounts and votes for static. Angler for the win. Yeah, so all right, so we'll put the anglerfish in there. And we'll make it an action group. We'll have it kind of wandering around. We'll go ahead and we'll start it in the library and we'll move it out from there. Let's see here. Of course, you do realize this means that we need to have other creepy animal, fish abominations in the Wizarding's Tower now, right? Now we got to come up with a whole bunch of other cool, creepy stuff for the Wizard's Tower because it's got to be far more wild than than just this anglerfish. So let's say scrying anglerfish. A 1 HP anglerfish with a scrying eye instead of a bioluminescent light. And of course, I've misspelled that. So tonight, patrols through the whole stronghold. And we're going to make it CR 0 because we're not going to give it a stat block. It should be easy enough to hit and destroy because it's a clue, not an actual countermeasure. So we'll say active. Okay. Let's see here. Jonathan Frost says the castle's getting wild. Yeah, it is. Fantasy Animal Vegan says man, bear, pig, fish, and the wizard. Yes, in the Wizard's Tower for sure. Basically says that does make sense. And then Adam Clark, I think encountering the anglerfish in the stronghold would be noteworthy because it wouldn't be hostile. Might even be slightly helpful, seeing as its outside party is watching. Might prompt some investigation by the party. You know, and now that you mentioned that, that's actually a really good point because you're slinking about through this, and all of a sudden, this anglerfish spots you, and you know you've been spotted, right? It's something that the characters that we can narrate to the characters, and yet no hell breaks loose. No alarm gets sounded. It doesn't attack. It doesn't run off to alert anything. Nobody comes moving in to get you. It just takes quiet note of you and moves along. That would be, I think, in some ways more chilling than it raising the alarm. So yeah, it's a cool thing. Means though that we should Yeah, but we could, Baker's dozen. So you said I do understand your point about how it might be considered as part of the Sahu again, and uh, yeah, I mean, I stand by that, but the same token, that's surmountable. We can solve that problem in the narration and in with the information we give our characters when they do a check on this to kind of figure out what it is. Um, so it's yes, it is a challenge. It's something to be aware of when we use this, but it's not an insurmountable one. And so I think it makes this a very useful piece. So let's do it. Let's do it. So we can get rid of this bit here. Let's see here. Jonathan says unsettling. Adam Clark says just got chills. Yeah, I'm glad. I did too, and I was kind of narrating that, like slinking through the and being spotted by this anglerfish thing. And Baker's Dozen says you can always save the anglerfish as an idea for a key instead of a scrying eye for a future part of the campaign. You know what? It's such a good idea. Let's use it in a couple places. Let's not just use it for one thing. Let's have it pop up in other spots because as the characters learn more about what this thing is, that gives them in-game knowledge that now they can leverage and use as other things. So maybe we'll use it as part of um, a puzzle later too. Maybe we might have a room with anglerfish that have keys instead of that little light in there, and then you got to find the right key or whatever as part of a challenge in another dungeon or something along those lines. Um, and yeah, and to that end, it gives us some vibe on this wizard. One thing I do want to do before we forget is um, this scrying eye is owned and viewed by the wizard. I don't know why I tried to capitalize that. Wizard in the Salt Tower. It can be traced back to him. So we at least know that this is a clue, and remind ourselves of that. Let's see here. Baker's Dozen says, I'll vote for the anglerfish, but I can see how it could be challenging as well. Adam Clark says, I feel like this wizard would have more than one scrying eye wandering about. And Baker's Dozen says, yes, must have lots of abominations. And yes, I 100% agree. And one of the nice things about this is it gives us a little bit of a vibe for this wizard. It becomes less of a generic wizard in generic tower now that we have a feeling for the kinds of things this wizard does. Creates living abominations out of fish that can do its spying for it, among other things. And so that gives us a cool vibe for that place and gives us something that we can kind of work in thematically when we write that section of the adventure. Fantasy Animal Vegan says, you mentioned earlier about adding this to an action group. What does that mean? Yeah, so one of the things that we've done here as part of this adventure is to keep it dynamic and to without using something like a random encounters table or a wandering monsters table or what have you, but to make this place feel alive, like the Sahuagin actually work and live here and do real activities throughout the stronghold. Is we've taken all of the encounters and we've put them into an action groups table, and we have given them alert statuses, starting alert statuses. So we know what area they start in. For example, we've got sentries in area 1 that are static, meaning that they stay there unless they're given a reason to leave for something, a diversion or something along those lines. But we also have, sentries in area 2 that are mobile, they're active, they're patrolling and moving about, and so they don't stay in area 2. They move throughout different parts of the complex, so that when you're sneaking down a corridor or what have you, you don't just have to beat the passive perception of the entities in the various rooms along that corridor. You have to worry about something coming down the corridor while you're moving through it. And so it just adds a little bit more dynamic tension to this. Baker's Dozen says, always want to have a water campaign with encounter that you would never expect a creature, a land creature like a T Rex that has been expelled permanently to breathe underwater. Yeah, we could do something like that in there. Water breathing T Rex. I can already see like the gill frill comes from it. Um, Adam Clark says, Marilyn, I'll see myself out. Oh, the pun. I love it. Um, Baker says T Rex may not be the best example, but you can do anything in this case. An underwater displacer yeah, it's a good idea. Um, Fantastic idea that would possibly be helpful. And then Fantasy Animal Vegan says action groups is genius. Yeah, so I'll be honest with you, the action groups is not, my idea. It's stuff I've learned picking up and watching other DMs and how they've organized things. Justin Alexander, in his book, So You Want to Be a Game Master, does a really good discussion of action groups and how he runs them. I run mine a little bit differently than he runs his, but it's a really great primer. So absolutely recommend giving it a read. And I am in no way, shape, or form affiliated with that book. So this is just a free. I think it's a good read. Highly recommend it. Sort of plug without there being any sort of kickback or anything like that to me. All right. Um, so we are at our time. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up for the evening here. We've got one final comment. It says, great idea, multiple anglers this is from Baker's Dozen. Great idea, multiple anglers, multiple purposes. Does help the players in understanding. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. It's a cool idea, man. You came up with something really awesome, and we want to work that in here because why not? It just makes it even better. And why use something just once when we can use it a couple times? It certainly has more legs than that, if you'll pardon the fact that fish don't have legs. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it. If you've enjoyed this live stream, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. All that kind of stuff helps the channel grow. It helps me stay motivated to keep doing this stuff. It helps more people find the channel and gets more people in the chat for this kind of stuff. So thank you so much for that. If you want to jump into one of my tables sometime, come check me out at startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr, spelled the same as my channel name. And I would love to get to meet some of you actually at the table. Otherwise, I will see you all at our next live stream on Wednesday. Talk to y'all soon. Bye now.